So when I'm doing stuff like that, cool, yeah. Yeah, so one of the other really useful techniques when you're fiber wielding, swinging rope dart style is something in poi that we call isolations, which is basically like a rotational isolation. Normally when you're swinging, this whole thing is rotating, spinning around your hand. That's like the center of the universe, and your prop is orbiting around that. But I can also circle my hand around and get the center of rotation isolated into the center of the fiber, the tether. So kind of a warm-up technique that'll get you to feel what an isolation feels like is to hold on to both the fiber and the handle, and try pedaling this like a bike. You're trying to keep the center of that fiber in the same place and make the same size circles with both hands. You can do it this way too. Eventually you can even transition between the two. So that's basically what an isolation is doing. Your hand is circling just as big as the head is when it's swinging, handle in this case. And that's a smaller circle than if you were just swinging this. So if I'm just swinging this from a central point of my hand, this is a bigger circle. It's actually, if you look at it, it's this long plus this long. And so this is twice as big as when you're isolating. So when you isolate, it's gonna feel like your circle contracts. So see, this circle is all the way from 1, 2 lengths. An isolation is just 1 length. It's just this big, it's a smaller circle. And your hand is moving that big of a circle instead of just, when you're swinging normally, your hand is drawing like a tiny little circle. So you're gonna have to get used to your hand moving around much larger. One thing is that isolating horizontally feels a lot different than isolating vertical spin. So this is also an isolation horizontally. And this feels kind of smoother and more consistent. It's constantly hanging down a little bit, but I can just kind of keep stirring this pot and keep it going. When I'm swinging vertically, I'm having to kind of like jump over gravity each time. So that's kind of a different thing. So I tend to like people to start out just hanging here and start easing into a horizontal isolation. So if you hang this here and think about actually like stirring your hand around, kind of like you're stirring a pot. So Nick Woolsey and I teach it at poi retreats. You can slowly get to the point where you're also dragging that head around while it's dangling there. So as a complementary practice for isolations, you can also play with pendulums. It's kind of useful to get comfortable with relaxing into this swing while keeping it in control. And as you get comfortable with this, you can try to start rocking your hand back and forth, kind of going in the contrary direction of the pendulum, so that I'm starting to isolate the pendulum so it's swinging in the center rather than swinging from my hand. And you might notice, so here's what the isolated pendulum looks like just here flat on a plane. When I get this horizontal pendulum going, it's kind of the same. I'm just stirring it around. So you can almost kind of get this going and then start working it around. That's one way to feel into it. Or the other pretty classic way is how we started out with just started hanging, start drawing horizontal circles like spinning or stirring a pot with your hand, and feel how to pull that head around. So now once you've gotten kind of used to the horizontal isolation, the other thing you can do, maybe even from hanging, is kind of like pull. You're lifting the handle up and over, but you're doing it really gently. You're not swinging it like this. You're just kind of like dragging it and letting it fall. And And as that happens, you scoop your hand around underneath it as it falls, like that. So that is like one vertical isolation, and you'll really feel how gravity, first you have to kind of tug it up and over the top of the roller coaster, and then you got to swing your hand underneath while it's kind of floating and falling. And then you can start repeating that, and as you get a feel for it, start to smooth that out and create a little more tension to even out what's happening. And then there's some other stuff that can come out of that. So this is fun to play with in general when you're swinging, fiber wielding, more rope dart or poi style. But a lot of interesting work around the body, actually, it helps to be comfortable with isolations. So for instance, if I just stand here and swing this around me, that's going to be one thing. If I swing this around me and then start to isolate, that really allows me to spiral around and isolate around my torso and my body. So when I'm doing stuff like that, if I didn't feel comfortable isolating, I wouldn't really be able to complete that movement the way I did. You can even do this with like leg work too. So for instance, I'm swinging down here and I want to wrap in between my legs, I could just pick my leg up, but with kind of a regular stance, if I know how to isolate, I can also isolate in and out, because if I've got a bigger circle not isolating, when I start to isolate, it shrinks that circle down, so you can slip in between your legs without hitting your other leg. So as I swing down, I can isolate to get around that leg. So another complementary practice when you're learning isolations, particularly vertical isolations, is stirring the isolation with your other hand. So what that would look like is placing your hand right, kind of right past the center point of from grip to head, and as you move your hand around, scooping the prop up and over with your free hand. So like that. That can help you start to get the feel for how to isolate. Eventually you can loop that motion over and over again. You may want to do this fairly short, so this is another one where you might want like a practice sock poi or something that's a little shorter and more comfortable to learn it first, and then start doing it with your whip. This is a hand leading isolation wrapping around because it's basically like the hand is leading and pulling the head around like that. The other version is a little trickier. That's a head leading one. So that's going to be the head is leading around and the hand is chasing after it. So to do that, you're going to swing at your arm almost like you were starting like a wrap, but then you're going to chase after it with your hand. So you can even get just a little bit of bend, and as the prop is swinging up, that's when you chase after it with your hand. As the prop starts to swing up, that's when you chase after it. And of course you can continue that as well. It's going to train it on your arm, but that's also what it feels like when you're going around your body. So when I'm swinging this around my body, that's actually a head-led isolation. The head is coming around me and I'm chasing after it with my hand, as opposed to if I were pulling, that would be a hand-led isolation, which is a bit harder to get going. I'll have to play with that, actually. That's a good idea. Something like that, but yeah, you guys get the idea. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys learning how to isolate the prop. We're gonna keep coming out with other tutorials and inspiring videos, so make sure to like and subscribe our YouTube and follow us on Facebook and Instagram so that you don't miss any of the content we have coming up. even know what's going on.